Imagine standing on a rain-slicked London street in 1790, the air thick with coal smoke, and secret gas lamps casting golden pools that barely pierce the fog. And from a grand house on Drury Lane, the faint trill of a harpsichord weaves through the night, laced with laughter that sounds just a little too perfect. What if every smile you gave belonged to someone else, every word a performance, every breath a debt you could never repay? Welcome to History Orbit, where we spiral through the hidden cycles of the past, uncovering the raw, resilient stories of those who shaped our world in the shadows. If you're new to our journey, hit that subscribe button and join us as we dive into the untold corners of history. Drop a comment with where you're watching from and what time it is. Let us see who is orbiting with us tonight. Now, dim the lights, let the world fade and step into the glittering, treacherous demimonde of London's elite courtesans, where beauty was a currency and a single misstep could cost everything. In the late 18th century, London's Covent Garden wasn't just a bustling square of fruit stalls and flower girls. It was a stage, a dazzling theatre of desire where women draped in satin and lace played roles that could sway fortunes or shatter lives. These were the courtesans, not the desperate figures of back alleys, but high society companions who could charm a lord, outsmart a merchant, or make a poet believe his verses were divine. They were artists of illusion, trained to sing, recite poetry, dance with the grace of swans, and converse with wit sharp enough to cut through the haze of port wine. Their faces, powdered to porcelain perfection, hid stories no one dared to tell. These women were more than entertainers, they were survivors, navigating a world where every gesture was calculated, every smile a contract, and every heartbeat a reminder of the chains they couldn't see. Let's orbit closer to one such woman, whom we'll call Eliza Thornton, a name woven from the threads of history's forgotten. Eliza was barely 16 when she crossed the threshold of a grand house on Drury Lane. Her dark curls pinned high with silver combs, her corset laced so tightly. Her ribs ached with every breath, her lips painted carmine to mask the tremble of fear. She wasn't born to this life. Once she was a farmer's daughter, her world all muddy fields and simple dreams, until hunger and debt pushed her family to sell her to a madam named Mrs. Langley, a woman with eyes like flint and a ledger for a heart. The promise was glamour silk gowns, candlelit dinners, the company of nobles. The reality was a gilded cage. Eliza's every step was owned, her every word scripted, her every coin funneled back to the house. The satin dresses, the lessons in French and harp, the perfumed oils that made her skin glow, all were debts piling higher than the steeples of St. Paul stopped by the time she faced her first client. She owed more than most families earned in a decade. This was the demimonde, a world of velvet curtains and iron rules where beauty was a product and pregnancy was its greatest flaw. To understand Eliza's world, picture a grand salon, chandeliers dripping with crystal, the air heavy with rose water and cigar smoke. Men in powdered wigs and velvet coats lounged on damask chairs, their laughter loud, their eyes hungry. Merchants with new money, lords with old names, poets drunk on claret and their own metaphors, they came to escape reality, to buy a dream where they were kings and the women their muses. Eliza moved among them, her laugh a practiced melody, her gaze a careful balance of warmth and mystery. She recited Shakespeare, poured wine with a steady hand, and let them believe she hung on their every word. But behind the painted fans and fluttering lashes, her life was a tightrope. One wrong step, a churlish glance, a missed curtsy, or worst of all, a swelling belly could send her plummeting. Pregnancy wasn't just a personal crisis in this world. It was a betrayal of the fantasy, a crack in the illusion that men paid dearly to maintain. A courtesan's value lay in her availability, her ability to make every client feel singular, adored, without the messy consequences of the real world. A baby shattered that lie, reminding men of wives left at home, of responsibilities they'd rather forget. For the madam, it was worse. A pregnant courtesan was a product off the market, a financial loss that could sour a season's profits. In the demimonde, where every night was a performance, pregnancy was the ultimate curtain drop. Let's linger on Eliza for a moment. Standing in her candlelit room, the walls papered in crimson, the mirror reflecting a face that doesn't feel like hers. She's 18 now, 2 years into this life, her debts heavier, her dreams lighter. She's learned to navigate them, meant some kind, some cruel, all temporary. There's Lord Harrow, who whispers of love but leaves before dawn. There's Mr. Carver, a merchant whose gifts come with demands. And there's the poet, Julian, who thinks his sonnets are payment enough. They don't see her as a person, only as a moment, a muse, a mirror for their desires. But Eliza sees everything, their weaknesses, their lies, the way they vanish when reality knocks. And now reality is knocking for her. She's late a week, then 2. Her corset feels tighter, not from the laces, but from something deeper, something growing. Her stomach churns, not just from nerves, but from a truth she can't name aloud. In another world, this might be a miracle, a cause for joy. Here, it's a ticking clock, a secret that could unravel her life. The Madam, Mrs. Langley, watches her like a hawk, her quill scratching numbers in a book that never balances in Liz's favor. The other girls, some friends, some rivals, whisper in the corridors, their eyes darting to her waist. Trust is scarce. A careless word could reach Mrs. Langley, and then what? Demotion to the tavern rooms, where men smell of gin and grab without asking? Or worse, expulsion, cast onto the streets with nothing but a stained gown and a ruined name? Liz's world is a house of cards, and pregnancy is a gust of wind. So, what does she do? She performs. She smiles brighter, laughs louder, tightens her corset until her breath comes in gasps. She blames her pallor on late nights, her nausea on bad oysters from the market. But alone, in the quiet of her room, she counts days on a calendar only she can see, her fingers trembling as she sips tea laced with pennyroyal. A bitter herb whispered about in the kitchens. It's a secret passed like a prayer between the girls. Steep it strong, drink it hot, pray to Saint Margaret. The tea burns her throat, twists her stomach, promises to clear the womb but offers no guarantees. Some say it worked for Mary, the red-haired girl who vanished last spring. Others say it left her bleeding, sent to a back room to recover or disappear. Eliza drinks, waits, hopes, all while gliding through the salon, her smile a mask, her heart a battlefield. But the tea isn't enough, not yet. She tries vinegar, poured into a basin in the dead of night, a stinging wash that's more desperation than science. The other girls teach her the tricks: walk differently, tilt your hips, hold your breath to hide the curve. They speak in code behind fans, in glances. Don't use tansy, it's for fevers. Pennyroyal's the one. Or try the hot bath, but don't faint. These remedies aren't medicine, they're gambles, passed down from survivors, not healers. The hot bath comes next, water so scalding it turns her skin red, the steam thick with herbs. She soaks until her head spins, whispering prayers to saints she doesn't trust, hoping her body will reject what it's begun. The pain is sharp, the risk sharper. She's heard the stories, girls who fainted, girls who didn't wake up, girls who were dragged from the bath and buried in unmarked graves. But she stays because the alternative is worse. She can't let Mrs. Langley see, can't let the clients suspect. Every night, she paints her face, slips into her gown, and steps back onto the stage. Her body a secret, her smile a lie. The demimonde is a world of mirrors, reflecting only what others want to see. Liz's reflection is flawless, but beneath it, she's fighting a war no one else can know. Let's pause here in the flicker of her candle, the weight of her secret growing heavier with each passing day. Eliza S. story isn't just hers, it is the story of countless women who walked this tightrope, balancing beauty and survival in a world that demanded both and forgave neither. Their lives were a cycle, an orbit of performance and peril where every choice was a risk, every secret a battle. As we spiral deeper into their shadows, we'll uncover the next layer of their fight, the desperate measures they took. When teas and baths failed, when the body refused to comply, and the world closed in. What did it mean to carry a secret that could cost you everything? How did they endure when the stakes were life, shame, or exile? Our orbit is just beginning, and as we trace the threads of their resilience, we'll find answers not in the light of the salon, but in the quiet, trembling moments where survival was all they had. Let's follow that thread into the next curve of history's arc, where the fight for control took on darker, more desperate forms. Step into the flicker of a single candle, its flame dancing on the crimson walls of Eliza Thornton's room where the air is thick, with the scent of rosewater and the weight of a secret that could unravel her world. In the demi-monde of 1790 London, where every smile is a performance and every gown a contract, Eliza stands at a crossroads, her heart pounding as she counts the days since her last cycle, her fingers tracing the edge of a teacup laced with pennyroyal, its bitter steam curling like a warning. This is no ordinary night in Covent Garden, where the laughter of lords and the clink of wine glasses mask a quieter, more desperate struggle. We're orbiting deeper now, following the thread of Eliz's story, spiraling into the hidden crisis that threatened not just her body, but her very existence. What happens when a courtesan, trained to embody perfection, faces a truth her world refuses to accept? How does she fight a battle no one can know about, in a place where whispers are as dangerous as knives? Let's trace the steps of a silent war where every choice was a gamble, and survival demanded more than courage, it demanded cunning. Eliza's life in the grand house on Drury Lane was a tapestry of illusion, woven with satin threads and fragile lies. By day, she was a vision, gliding through salons, her laughter a melody that charmed men who thought they owned her time. By night, alone in her room, she was a strategist, plotting to keep her secret from Mrs. Langley, the madam whose ledger held more power than any lord's title. The first signs of trouble were subtle, a queasiness that lingered beyond breakfast, a fatigue that no amount of rouge could hide, a corset that pressed against her ribs with new insistence. She blamed it on the oysters from the market, on late nights spent entertaining, on anything but the truth. But the truth was relentless, growing inside her, a quiet rebellion against the rules of the demi-monde. Pregnancy wasn't just a personal matter here, it was a crisis that threatened the house's profits, the client's fantasies, and Eliz's precarious place in this gilded cage. To survive, she had to conceal it, to perform as if nothing had changed, even as her body whispered otherwise. The other girls, a mix of allies and rivals, were her only lifeline. Some, like Clara, a sharp-tongued brunette who'd seen too many winters in the trade, offered coded advice behind the flutter of a fan. "Drink the tea with 3 leaves, not 5, Clara whispered one night, her eyes darting to the doorway. 5's for headaches, 3's for... Well, you know, the tea was pennyroyal, steeped until it was black as ink, its scent sharp enough to sting the eyes. Eliza drank it in secret, in the early hours when the house was quiet, her hands trembling as she prayed to St. Margaret, the patron of expectant mothers, though she sought not protection but escape. The tea twisted her stomach, sent cramps rippling through her, promised to clear the womb but offered no certainty. She'd heard the stories, girls who drank and bled, girls who drank and didn't, girls who vanished after 1 cup too many. Mary, the red-haired courtesan who'd left last spring, was said to have succeeded, her secret buried with her departure. But others spoke of fevers, of hallucinations, of pain that lingered like a ghost. Eliza sipped, waited, hoped, all while stepping back into the salon each night, her smile a shield, her laughter a lie. The tea wasn't her only weapon. In the dim light of her room, she poured vinegar into a basin, a stinging wash she'd learned from Rose, a quiet girl who rarely spoke but knew the old ways. Vinegar, sometimes laced with mercury for those desperate enough to risk it, was another gamble, a burning ritual performed in the dead of night. Eliza winced as she used it, her breath hitching, her prayers softer now, less about saints and more about survival. The other girls taught her to walk differently, to tilt her hips, to hold her breath to mask any curve. "Keep your obi tight," Rose murmured, referring to the wide sash that mimicked the Japanese style some houses adopted for exotic flair. "Tighter than you think you can bear." Eliza laced her corset until her vision blurred, her ribs protesting, her body a battlefield where beauty fought biology. The pain was a small price to pay when the alternative was discovery. Discovery meant Mrs. Langley's wrath, a demotion to the tavern rooms where men were rougher, their coins fewer, their hands less kind. Or worse, it meant the streets where a woman without a protector was prey. Eliz's war was fought in silence, but it was no less fierce. The salon remained her stage, and she played her part flawlessly. Lord Harrow, with his promises of love that faded with the dawn, noticed nothing. Mer. Carver, the merchant who gifted her pearls but demanded her nights, saw only the curve of her smile. Julian, the poet, was too lost in his own verses to see her pallor. But Mrs. Langley was different. Her eyes, sharp as quills, lingered on Liz's waist, her step, her appetite. "You're looking pale, girl," she said one evening, her voice soft but cold like frost on glass. Eliza laughed, blamed the wine, and poured more for the client at her side. But the madam's gaze followed her, a shadow she couldn't outrun. The other girls were a mixed blessing. Clara might help, but others, like Beatrice, whose beauty was fading, and whose favor with Mrs. Langley was all she had, might betray her for a better room or a lighter debt. Trust was a coin rarely spent here, and Eliza hoarded hers like gold. She learned to read the house's rhythms, to slip into the kitchen when the maids were asleep, to brew her teas in a corner where no one looked. She learned to lie with her body, to stand straighter, to move with a grace that hid her pain. The hot bath came next, a remedy whispered in the corridors like a forbidden spell. "Soak until you're dizzy," Clara said, her voice low, her eyes distant. "If you faint, it's working." Eliza filled a copper tub in a back room, the water scalding, steam rising like ghosts. She added pennyroyal leaves, their sharp scent mixing with the heat, and sank in, her skin burning. Her heart racing. The pain was immediate. A fire that spread from her caught her limbs, but she stayed, gripping the tub's edge, whispering prayers she didn't believe. The stories were grim girls who'd fainted and been found, girls who'd bled too much, girls who'd been carried out in the night, their fates unspoken. Eliza endured, her breath shallow, her vision swimming, hoping the heat would force her body to comply. Each night, after the bath, she returned to the salon, her face painted, her gown pristine, her smile a masterpiece of deception. But the baths weren't enough, and the teas kept failing. The clock was ticking louder now, her secret heavier. She tried other remedies, each more desperate than the last. Fermented bread, soaked in vinegar and sprinkled with herbs, was said to weaken the womb. She choked it down, its sourness matching the bitterness in her heart. The girls shared rituals, half superstition, half hope, chanting soft verses as they ate. "Return to the river, little one, for now is not your time." Eliza whispered the words, her voice trembling, her hands clutching the bread as if it could save her. It didn't. The nausea came, the cramps, but nothing more. She was running out of options, and the house was closing in. Mrs. Langley's scrutiny grew sharper, her questions pointed. "You're eating less," she noted, her quill pausing over the ledger. Eliza laughed, blamed the heat, but the madam's smile didn't reach her eyes. The other girls watched, some with pity, some with calculation. Eliza's world was shrinking, her secret a weight she couldn't carry much longer. She began to hear whispers of another way, a darker path. In the alleys of Covent Garden, there were women, shadows who moved without names, who could fix what teas and baths couldn't. They were called night midwives, not the gentle hands of childbirth, but grim figures who worked in silence, their tools crude, their methods final. Eliza heard their names in hushed tones: Mother Agnes, old Nell passed like forbidden coins between the girls. "Find her at the third alley past the tavern," Clara whispered one night, slipping a folded note into Eliz's hand. "Bring coin, or something to trade." Eliza hesitated, her heart a drumbeat of fear and hope. The night midwives were a last resort, their work a gamble with death. She'd heard the stories, girls who went and never returned, girls who bled out in dark rooms, girls who survived but carried scars no one could see. Yet the alternative was worse. If Mrs. Langley found out, Eliza's life would unravel. Demotion, expulsion, or worse, a quiet disappearance. Her name erased from the ledger as if she'd never existed. The salon's laughter grew distant, the chandeliers dimmer as Eliza weighed her choices. Each night, she performed, her smile a mask, her body a lie, but the truth was growing, pressing against her corset, her conscience, her courage. The demi-monde was a world of mirrors, reflecting only what others wanted to see, but Eliz's reflection was cracking. She stood at the edge of a precipice, Her secret a weight that could pull her under or push her to fight. What would she choose when the teas failed, the baths burned, and the house's eyes were everywhere? How far would she go to protect the illusion that kept her alive? Our orbit spirals deeper now, following Eliz's thread into a world of darker measures where survival demanded not just cunning but sacrifice. The courtesans of London's demi-monde were warriors in silk, their battles fought in whispers and shadows, their resilience a quiet defiance against a world that owned their bodies but could never claim their spirits. As we trace this cycle of survival, we move toward the next turn of their story, where the fight grew grimmer, the stakes higher, and the choices more desperate. What did it mean to hold a secret when discovery meant ruin? Let's step into the shadows together, where the next chapter of their courage waits, woven into the fabric of a world that demanded perfection but offered no grace. Feel the weight of a corset's laces, pulled so tight they steal your breath, as Eliza Thornton stands before a cracked mirror in her Drury Lane room, the candlelight casting shadows that dance like ghosts across her face. In the demi-monde of 1790 London, where every step is a performance and every secret a risk, Eliz's world is closing in, her body betraying her with a truth she can't hide much longer. The pennyroyal tea has failed, the scalding baths have left her dizzy but unchanged, and the whispers of night midwives linger like a dare she is not yet brave enough to take. Our orbit through history's hidden cycles pulls us deeper now into the heart of a courtesan, a desperate fight to protect her place in a world that demands perfection but offers no mercy. What does it mean to wage a silent war against your own body when discovery could mean ruin? How does a woman endure when every choice is a gamble between survival and shame? Let's follow Eliz's thread, tracing the measure she and countless others took when the stakes grew higher, the shadows darker, and the cost of defiance was everything. Eliz's days in the grand house on Drury Lane were a delicate dance, each step choreographed to please the Madam, Mrs. Langley, and the clients who filled her ledger with coins. But now, her body was rewriting the script. The queasiness lingered, the fatigue deepened, and her corset, once a symbol of elegance, was a cage pressing against a secret she couldn't conceal forever. She tried the teas, bitter with pennyroyal and tansy, sipped in the dead of night while the house slept. She'd endured the burning douches, vinegar and mercury stinging her skin, and the scalding baths that left her trembling, her prayers to St. Margaret unanswered. Each failure tightened the knot in her chest, each day brought misses. Langley's gaze closer, her quill pausing over the ledger with a scrutiny that felt like a blade. The other girls, a fragile web of allies and rivals, were her only shield. Clara, with her sharp tongue and sharper eyes, had taught her the codes, how to blame nausea on bad oysters, how to walk with hips tilted to hide a curve. Rose, the quiet one, had shown her the vinegar wash, her whispers soft but heavy with warning. But even their help came with risk. Beatrice, whose beauty was fading and whose loyalty lay with the madam, watched Eliza with a smile that promised betrayal. Trust was a currency rarer than gold, and Eliza spent it sparingly. She moved through the salon each night, her laughter bright, her gown flawless, but her mind was a battlefield, calculating, planning, surviving. The next step was binding, a method whispered in the corridors like a last resort before the night midwives. It was called corset binding here, not the Japanese haobi, but the idea was the same: wrap your body so tightly that the truth might be squeezed out, or at least hidden long enough to avoid disaster. Eliza stood before her mirror, her hands shaking as she wound long strips of linen around her waist. Tighter than her corset, tighter than her courage. The cloth bit into her skin, pressing her ribs, her breath coming in shallow gasps. She layered it again and again, her reflection blurring as her vision swam, her body protesting but her will unyielding. The goal wasn't comfort, it was illusion. A flat silhouette meant survival, a visible curve meant doom. She practiced standing straighter, holding her breath, moving with a grace that hid the pain. The other girls had warned her, "Don't sit too long, it loosens the bind. Don't eat too much, it shows." Eliza nodded, her smile a mask, her body a prison. The binding worked for a while. Clients like Lord Harrow, with his fleeting promises of love, saw only her painted lips dogma. Carver, the merchant, noticed only her poise. Julian, the poet, was too lost in his own metaphors to see her strain. But Mrs. Langley was another matter. Her eyes, cold and calculating, lingered on Eliz's waist, her step, her appetite. "You're looking frail, girl," she said one evening, her voice soft but sharp like a needle through silk. Eliza laughed, blamed the summer heat, but the madam's gaze followed her, a shadow she couldn't shake. The binding was a temporary shield, but it came with a cost. Her ribs ached, her breath was shallow, her digestion faltered. She fainted once, alone in her room, waking to find her corset loosened. Her secret still safe, but her fear sharper. The girls whispered of worse ruptured tissues, internal bleeding, women who bound too tightly and paid with their lives. But Eliza had no choice. The salon demanded perfection, and perfection demanded sacrifice. She slept with the binding on, her dreams restless, her body a battleground where survival fought shame. Alongside the binding came rituals, softer but no less desperate. The girls shared folklore, half superstition, half hope, passed down from older courtesans and kitchen maids. Fermented bread, soaked in vinegar and sprinkled with herbs, was said to weaken the womb. Eliza choked it down, its sourness burning her throat, her hands clutching the crust as she whispered a chant Clara had taught her. "Return to the river, little one, for now is not your time." The words were a prayer, not to saints but to survival, a plea for her body to obey. She ate in secret, hiding the bread beneath her bed, gagging on its bitterness but swallowing anyway. Another ritual involved wine, warmed with crushed garlic and sage, drunk slowly while facing east, as if the dawn could wash away the truth. The logic was shaky, the desperation real. Eliza followed the rituals, not because she believed, but because they gave her something to do, a flicker of control in a world that offered none. The bread made her sick, the wine left her dizzy, but the secret remained, growing heavier with each passing day. The clients, blissfully unaware, were part of the problem. Lord Harrow, with his velvet coat and empty promises, never stayed long enough to notice her pallor. Carver, whose pearls came with demands, cared only for her smile. Julian, the poet, thought his sonnets were enough, never seeing the strain behind her eyes. In the demi-monde, men didn't want reality, they wanted fantasy, and a pregnant courtesan was a reminder of consequences they'd paid to forget. If Eliza hinted at her trouble, they vanished, their faces blank, their names absent from the guest book. "I'm off to Bath," Lord Harrow said one night, his smile tight, his departure swift. Carver claimed business in Bristol, Julian muttered about inspiration in the countryside. They were gone before Eliza could speak, leaving her to face the truth alone. The house's rules were clear. The client was never to blame. If a courtesan fell pregnant, it was her failure, her carelessness, as if she'd chosen this burden. Mrs. Langley's ledger didn't account for shared responsibility, it accounted for profit. And Eliza was a liability. The whispers grew louder now, the girl's eyes sharper. Beatrice, ever watchful, lingered near Mrs. Langley's parlour, her smile a warning. Clara, though, slipped Eliza a note one night. A folded scrap with an address, third alley past the tavern, midnight, bring coin or a trinket. It was the way to Mother Agnes, a night midwife, a woman of shadows who asked no questions and left no traces. Eliza's heart raced as she tucked the note into her sleeve, her mind torn between fear and necessity. The night midwives were a last resort, their work a gamble with death. Stories swirled girls who went to them and never returned, girls who bled out in dark rooms, girls who survived, but carried scars no gown could hide. Mother Agnes was a legend, a former courtesan herself, now a ghost in Covent Garden's alleys, her hands steady, but her tools crude, a knife for cloth, boiling water, and prayers to no one. Eliza hesitated, her fingers tracing the note, her courage faltering. The risk was enormous infection, infertility, a quiet death in a back room. But the alternative was worse if Mrs. Langley found out. Punishment was certain. Some girls were demoted, sent to the tavern rooms where men were rough and coins were few. Others were confined, locked in their rooms until the problem was resolved, their meals sparse, their futures dim. The worst were cast out, their names struck from the ledger, their lives erased as if they'd never existed. Eliza had seen it happen. Mary, the red-haired girl, gone without a word, her room reassigned, her story buried. The madam's cruelty was cold, calculated. A reminder to every girl that the house owned their bodies, their choices, their fates. Eliza's secret was a weight she carried alone, but it was growing too heavy to bear. She began to dream of escape. Another desperate measure whispered in the corridors. Some girls ran, slipping out in the dead of night, their gowns traded for plain cloaks, their hair undone, their identities shed like a snake's skin. They called them night runners, women who fled the demi-monde for a chance at freedom, however slim. Eliza heard the stories, a girl who hid in a laundry cart, another who bribed a coachman, another who vanished into a convent, her past buried beneath a nun's veil. The risks were staggering. Running was illegal, courtesans were property, and the house took their absence personally. Bounty hunters roamed London's streets, paid to drag runaways back for punishment, public humiliation, a beating, or worse, a return to the lowest ranks. Yet some made it, or so the whispers said. A cousin's farm in Kent, a fishing village by the coast, a shrine in the hills where no one asked questions. Eliza dreamed of such places, but the reality was grim. She had no money, no family, only a comb and a blood-stained sash. Running wasn't freedom, it was a different cage, one of silence and hiding. Still, the idea lingered, a spark in the dark. The final measure, if all else failed, was the unthinkable, giving birth in secret. Eliza heard whispers of girls who'd done it, in attics or storage rooms, their screams muffled by rags, their pain hidden behind paper walls. These were silent deliveries, births without joy, only urgency and fear. A trusted maid or an old courtesan might help, bringing towels, boiling water, whispering prayers to Saint Anne. The baby, if it survived, was a fleeting presence, loved for a moment before being spirited away. Some were left at foundling hospitals like London's Coram, swaddled in cloth with a charm or a note. No name, no goodbye. Others were taken by strangers, raised in silence or servitude, their mothers' faces forgotten. Eliza imagined it, her hands trembling as she pictured a child she'd never hold, a life she'd never know. The thought broke her, but the demi-monde offered no room for motherhood. The show must go on, the salon must glitter, and Eliza must smile, even as her heart bled. The aftermath of these measures was a shadow that never lifted. Some girls survived the teas, the baths, the midwives, but carried scars, physical, emotional, spiritual. Others didn't. Their stories were erased, their names unspoken, their fates a warning to the rest. Eliza, still standing, still binding, still praying, was a warrior in silk, her courage woven into every choice she made. But the house was watching, the clock was ticking, and her secret was a flame that could burn her world to ash. The demi-monde was a place of mirrors, reflecting only what others wanted to see. But Eliza's reflection was cracking, her strength tested, her spirit unbroken but bending. What would she do when the binding failed, when the midwives loomed, when the choice was no longer hers? Our orbit carries us forward into the next turn of this cycle, where the stakes grew even graver, and the fight for survival took on new forms. The courtesans of London's demi-monde were not just women, they were survivors. Their resilience acquired rebellion against a world that owned their bodies but could never claim their hearts. As we spiral deeper, we'll uncover the final measures they took, the sacrifices they made, and the echoes of their courage that linger in history's shadows. What did it cost to defy a world that demanded everything? Let's trace the cost, step by trembling step, into the next arc of their story, where the line between survival and surrender blurred, and the human spirit shone through the cracks. Picture a riverbed in 1848 California where the icy water swirls over pebbles. That gleam with a promise no one yet understands, and a carpenter named Elias T. Whitaker kneels, his calloused hands sifting through the silt, his breath catching, as he spots a flicker of gold. The world Eliza Thornton fought to survive in, with its candlelit salons and desperate secrets, feels a universe away. Yet the human drive to defy fate binds their stories across time. Our orbit through history, as hidden cycles, now carries us from the shadowed demi-monde of London to the rugged frontier of the American West, where a single discovery ignited a fever that reshaped lives, lands, and dreams. What does it take to chase a glimmer that could be fortune or folly? How does a spark in a riverbed set a nation ablaze? Let's follow this new thread, tracing the California gold rush through the eyes of those who risked everything, their hopes as bright and fragile as the flecks they sought. Eliz's battle was one of whispers and shadows, but Elias's world was one of grit and gamble, where survival demanded not deception but daring. In January 1848, Elias, a weathered carpenter from Massachusetts, was building a sawmill for a rancher named John Sutter in the Sacramento Valley. The land was raw, a patchwork of oak groves and native villages, untouched by the frenzy about to unfold. Elias wasn't looking for riches that morning, only a steady wage to send home to his sister in Boston. But as he cleared debris from the millrace, his fingers brushed something cold, something that caught the sun in a way that made his heart skip. Gold, raw and unpolished, lay scattered in the riverbed, tiny specks that whispered of wealth beyond his carpenter's dreams. He gathered a handful, tested it with a bite, felt its softness yield. This wasn't fool's gold, it was real. Elias didn't know it then, but his discovery would spark a migration unlike any the world had seen. A tidal wave of dreamers, drifters, and desperates who'd abandon homes, families, and reason for a chance at the river's promise. Word spread like wildfire, first a murmur among the mill workers, then a shout that echoed across California. By spring, San Francisco's streets were emptying, sailors deserting ships, farmers leaving plows to rust. Elias, no prospector, found himself swept into the chaos, his quiet life upended by the very flecks he'd found. He wasn't alone. Men, women, and children poured into the Sierra foothills, their eyes bright with hope, their hands clutching pans and picks. They called themselves the 49ers, a name that would echo through history. But in those early days, they were just people chasing a dream. The gold fields became a new kind of demimonde, not of silk and secrets, but of mud and madness, where survival demanded strength, luck, and a willingness to endure. The boom towns sprang up overnight, canvas tents and wooden shacks stretching across hillsides, their names as raw as the land. Hangtown, rough and ready, whiskey flat. Elias, now a reluctant prospector, found himself in Coloma, the epicenter of the rush, where the American river ran cold and the air buzzed with ambition. The work was brutal, hours spent crouching in icy water, panning for flecks so small they barely tipped a scale. A good day might yield an ounce, worth $16, enough to buy a month's provisions. A bad day, and most were bad, left nothing but blisters and hunger. Elias learned quickly, gold was fickle, hiding in crevices, teasing with glints that vanished under scrutiny. He shared a tent with a former tailor named Amos Reed, a weary man from New York who'd left his shop for a chance at riches. Amos was no miner, his hands soft from years of threading needles, but he panned with a doggedness that matched Elias's own. Together, they faced the river's cold, the sun's glare, and the constant threat of theft. The gold fields were lawless, governed by makeshift rules and vigilante justice. A stolen claim could spark a brawl, a cheated dealer hanging. Elias saw men strung up in Hangtown's oak grove, their bodies swaying as warnings to others. The 49ers weren't all men, though. Women arrived too, some with husbands, some alone, running boarding houses, saloons, or panning alongside the men. A widow named Margaret Cole, her face lined from years of farm labor, worked a claim near Elias, her skirts tied up, her hands as calloused as his. She'd left Ohio after her husband died, drawn by stories of gold that could buy a new life. Margaret wasn't chasing wealth, she wanted independence, a rare prize for a woman in 1848. Her pans yielded enough to keep her fed, but like most, she found more struggle than success. The gold fields didn't discriminate, breaking men and women alike with their endless demands. The native peoples, though, bore the brunt of the rush. The Maidu and Miwok, whose lands cradled the rivers, watched their world unravel. Prospectors trampled their villages, polluted their streams, and drove off their game. Elias saw it firsthand. A Maidu family, their faces gaunt, driven from their fishing spot by miners who claimed the river as their own. Disease followed, smallpox and cholera spreading through camps, sparing neither miners nor natives. The rush wasn't just a quest for gold, it was a conquest, leaving scars that would outlast the fever. Elias, a quiet man with no taste for violence, felt the weight of it, his discovery a spark that burned more than he'd intended. The camps were a melting pot, not just of Americans but of the world. Chinese miners arrived, their cues swinging as they worked, their methods meticulous but their presence unwelcome. Mexicans, skilled from sonorous silver mines, brought techniques that outperformed the amateurs, only to face resentment and taxes meant to drive them out. Elias heard the slurs, saw the fights, watched as foreigners were pushed to marginal claims, their gold taken by force or law. The rush was a dream of equality, anyone could strike it rich, but the reality was uglier. A scramble where greed trumped fairness. By 1849, the easy gold was gone, the riverbeds picked clean by the first wave. Elias, still panning, saw his yields shrink, his hands raw, his hope thinning. Amos, his tent mate, talked of quitting, his dreams of a tailor's empire fading. Margaret held on, her boarding house now her lifeline, serving beans and bacon to miners too tired to cook. The rush was changing, the lone prospector giving way to companies with machines that tore the earth apart. Hydraulic mining, with its hoses and sluices, scarred the hills, turned rivers to mud, and left ghost towns where boom towns once stood. Elias watched the land change, its beauty buried under rubble, its promise fading like a sunset. The rush wasn't just about gold, it was about reinvention, the idea that a man or a woman could start over, become something new. Elias, who'd never wanted more than a carpenter's wage, found himself dreaming bigger, imagining a shop of his own, a life beyond the river. Margaret spoke of a farm, her own land, free from debt or men's demands. Amos dreamed of a city, a place where his needles could stitch more than cloth. But dreams were fragile and the gold fields were cruel. For every miner who struck it rich, 100 left broken, their pockets empty, their bodies worn. Elias heard their stories. A preacher from Virginia, bankrupt after a year of panning. A boy from Missouri, dead from fever before his 17th birthday. A Chinese miner, beaten and driven off his claim. The rush gave, and the rush took, its cycle as relentless as the river's flow. Yet it reshaped the world. California's population exploded from a few thousand to over 100,000 in 2 years. San Francisco grew from a sleepy port to a city of saloons and banks. The rush pushed California to statehood in 1850. Its constitution born in a Monterey hall where miners and merchants argued over taxes and rights. The gold funded railroads, ships, a nation's ambition. But it came at a cost. The Maidu and Miwok were pushed to reservations, their cultures eroded. The land itself suffered, its rivers choked, its hills scarred. Elias, now 30, felt the weight of his discovery, a spark that had lit a fire he couldn't control. The gold fields were a new kind of demi-monde, not of silk and secrets, but of dirt and dreams, where survival demanded not deception but endurance. Elias, Margaret, and Amos were players in a larger cycle, one of ambition and loss, where the promise of gold was as much a trap as a treasure. Their stories echo Eliz's, not in the details, but in the spirit of refusal to break, a will to keep going, even when the odds were cruel. The rush was a fever, burning through lives, leaving some rich, most ruined or changed. As we orbit through this cycle, we see the human heart in its rawest form, chasing a glimmer that could be salvation or doom. What did it mean to stake everything on a dream when the land itself fought back? How did they endure when the gold ran dry and the world moved on? Our journey spirals forward into the next turn of this story, where the trials of the frontier reveal not just the cost of ambition, but the strength it forged. Let's follow the river's flow, where the echoes of their dreams still shimmer, waiting to be uncovered in the next arc of history's endless orbit. Feel the ache in your hands raw from hours of panning in the icy American river as Elias T. Whitaker squints against the California sun, the gold flecks in his pan growing scarcer with each passing day in 1849 Coloma. The fever that swept him and thousands of others into the Sierra foothills, sparked by his discovery, burns hotter than ever. But the land is less forgiving, its promises harder to grasp. Our orbit through history's relentless cycles carries us deeper into the California gold rush, where the dreams of Elias, Margaret Cole, and Amos Reed collide with the brutal realities of a frontier that gave as freely as it took. Just as Eliza Thornton fought to survive in London's demi-monde, these prospectors waged their own battles, not in candlelit salons, but in mud-soaked camps where ambition and hardship wove a story as raw as the earth itself. What does it mean to chase a dream when the ground beneath you shifts? How do you endure when the gold runs dry and the world moves on? Let's trace the trials of the rush, following the river's flow to uncover the lives it shaped, the scars it left, and the echoes that rippled far beyond the foothills. The gold fields of 1849 were a crucible, forging lives as quickly as they broke them. Elias, once a carpenter content with a steady wage, now stood knee-deep in the river, his back bent, his hands blistered, his hopes stretched thin. The early days of the rush, when gold lay scattered like stars in the gravel, were gone. By summer, the easy pickings had vanished, claimed by the first wave of 49ers who'd swarmed California after Elias's find. Now, every ounce demanded hours of labor, sifting through silt, battling currents that numbed the fingers and fevers that burned through the night. Elias shared a tent with Amos, the former tailor whose dreams of a New York empire had faded to a stubborn grit that kept him panning. Their camp, a cluster of canvas and driftwood on Coloma's banks, was one of dozens, each a fragile outpost in a land that cared nothing for their ambitions. Margaret Cole, the widow who'd left Ohio for a chance at independence, worked a claim nearby, her hands as rough as any man's, her boarding house a lifeline for miners too weary to cook. The three of them, bound by the river's promise, faced a world where survival was a daily gamble, and the stakes were higher than gold. Life in the gold fields was a test of endurance. Days began at dawn, the air sharp with frost, the river a shock of cold that seeped into bones. Panning was simple but brutal: scoop gravel, swirl water, pray for a glint. An ounce of gold, $16, could buy flour, bacon, a pair of boots. But most days yielded nothing, just mud and despair. Elias learned to read the river's moods, to spot the bends where gold might settle. But the river was fickle, its treasures hidden in crevices or washed away by spring floods. Amos, with his tailor's precision, built sluices, wooden troughs to filter gravel faster, but even these were no match for the land's resistance. Margaret, stronger than she looked, panned until her arms ached, then cooked for 20 men. Her boarding house a smoky shack where miners swapped stories of strikes and failures. Food was scarce, prices obscene. A single egg could cost $1, a sack of flour 10 times that. Disease was a constant shadow. Cholera swept through camps, carried by foul water and unwashed hands. Smallpox followed, leaving pockmarked survivors or silent graves. Elias saw a boy, barely 16, collapse by the river, his fever burning hotter than the sun. Margaret nursed him, her own fear buried beneath a widow's resolve, but the boy was gone by morning, his name lost to the rush. The gold fields didn't care for names or dreams, they demanded work, and they took lives without apology. Lawlessness defined the camps as much as labor did. With no courts or sheriffs, miners made their own rules, enforced by fists or ropes. Elias witnessed a hanging in Hangtown, a thief strung up on an oak for stealing a sack of dust. The crowd cheered, their faces hard, their justice swift. Claims were sacred, marked by stones or sticks, but disputes were common. A miner named Thomas Blake, a burly Kentuckian, accused Amos of jumping his claim, his knife flashing under the noon sun. Elias stepped in, his voice calm but firm, diffusing the fight with words he didn't know he had. But not all conflicts ended peacefully. Vigilante groups roamed the camps, their punishments as brutal as the land. Margaret saw a Chinese miner, Li Wei, driven from his claim by a mob who called him a thief. His tools smashed, his cue cutters a warning. The rush promised equality, anyone could strike it rich, but prejudice was as common as dust. Chinese, Mexican, and native miners faced taxes, violence, or exile. Their skills no match for the resentment of American-born prospectors. The native peoples suffered most. The Maidu and Miwok, whose lands held the gold, watched their world collapse. Miners trampled their villages, poisoned their streams with mercury, drove off their deer and fish. Elias saw a Maidu elder, his face carved with grief, begging for food at the edge of Coloma. Margaret gave him bread, but others threw stones, their laughter as cold as the river. Smallpox and starvation decimated tribes, their numbers halved in a single year. The rush wasn't just a quest for gold, it was a theft of land, culture, life. Elias, who'd sparked this fever, carried the weight of it, his discovery of flame that burned far beyond his control. The rush wasn't just hardship, it was transformation. For every miner who failed, another adapted, finding new ways to survive. Margaret's boarding house grew. Her meals a draw for men who craved a woman's cooking. She hired a Miwok girl, Iona, to help, teaching her English in exchange for labor. Their bond acquired rebellion against the camp's cruelty. Amos, his hands no longer soft, built a rocker box, a machine that doubled his yield. Though it still wasn't enough to make him rich, Elias, ever the carpenter, started crafting tools, trading shovels for gold dust. His skills worth more than his pan, but the lone prospector was fading. By 1850, companies with deep pockets arrived, their hydraulic hoses blasting hills to rubble, their sluices churning rivers to mud. The land bore the scars, its valleys choked with debris, its waters poisoned. Ghost towns rose where boom towns fell, their tents abandoned, their saloons silent. Elias walked through rough and ready, once alive with shouts, now a graveyard of dreams. The rush was shifting, its promise no longer for individuals, but for those with capital, machines, power. Yet the rush reshaped more than the land, it reshaped a nation. California's population swelled, from 10,000 in 1848 to over 100,000 by 1850. San Francisco, a sleepy port, became a city of brick and ambition. Its harbor choked with abandoned ships, their crews lost to the gold fields. The rush pushed California to statehood, its constitution hammered out in Monterey, where miners and merchants argued over slavery and taxes. Gold funded railroads, banks, a transcontinental dream that tied east to west. But the cost was steep. The Maidu and Miwok faced genocide, their land stolen, their voices silenced. The environment paid too, its rivers diverted, its hills eroded, its beauty buried under greed. Elias, now 31, felt the paradox of his discovery. He wasn't rich, few were, but he changed the world for better and worse. The rush was a mirror of human ambition, reflecting the same drive that pushed Eliza Thornton to survive in London's salons. Elias, Margaret, and Amos were no courtesans, but their fight was just as fierce, their stakes just as high. Elias dreamed of a shop, a return to carpentry, but the river held him, its pull stronger than reason. Margaret, her boarding house thriving, spoke of a farm, a life free from men's demands. But the gold fields were her reality, their chaos her home. Amos, his tailor's dreams faded, talked of San Francisco, a city where his skills might find new purpose. Their stories were threads in a larger tapestry, one of risk and resilience, where the human spirit burned bright even as it broke. The rush's legacy wasn't just gold, it was the idea of reinvention, the belief that a new start was possible, even if it came at a cost. California became a symbol, a place where anyone could try, even if most failed. The 49ers, with their pans and dreams, built a myth that outlasted the mines. Elias heard of men who struck it rich, like a German immigrant, Johann Strauss, who bought a ranch with his dust, or a woman, Eliza Hart, who opened a hotel in Sacramento, her wealth acquired triumph. But for every success, there were failures, a preacher who lost his faith, a boy who lost his life, a native family who lost everything. The rush was a cycle, like the one Eliza Thornton faced, where survival demanded not just strength but defiance, a refusal to let the world win. As we orbit through this story, we see the gold fields not as a place but as a moment, a flash of hope and horror that changed the world. What did it cost to chase a dream that could burn you? How did they carry on when the river ran dry? Our journey spirals forward into the next curve of history's arc, where another story of resilience waits, one that echoes the trials of Elias, Margaret, and Amos, but shines through a different lens, a different life, a different fight. Let's follow the echoes of their courage, tracing the threads of human spirit that bind the gold fields to the struggles yet to come, where the heart's refusal to surrender lights the way. Imagine a world of silence and shadow where the hum of a voice or the glow of a sunset exists only as a memory, and a young girl named Helen Keller, barely 19 months old, stands at the edge of a darkness she cannot yet comprehend. The California gold rush, with its rivers of hope and fields of struggle, fades into the distance as our orbit through history. As cycles of resilience carries us to 1880 Alabama, where a different kind of battle unfolds, not in the mud of Coloma or the salons of London, but in the quiet, fierce heart of a child who refused to be defined by her limitations. Just as Elias Whitaker, Margaret Cole, and Eliza Thornton fought against the constraints of their worlds, Helen's story is one of defiance, a testament to the human spirit's power to break through barriers as unyielding as stone. What does it mean to find a voice when the world hears only silence? How does one's soul's courage ripple across generations? Let's trace Helen's journey, from a wild child lost in darkness to a beacon of hope whose legacy echoes far beyond her time. In Tuscumbia, Alabama, Helen was born healthy, her eyes bright, her laughter a melody that filled her family's clapboard house. But in February 1882, a scarlet fever or meningitis, the doctors couldn't agree, stole her sight and hearing, leaving her in a world of isolation at 19 months. The vibrant toddler became a mystery, her mind trapped in a body that couldn't communicate. By age 6, Helen was a whirlwind of frustration, her tantrums shaking the household, her hands flailing to express what words could not. She smashed plates, tore at her mother's skirts, screamed into a void no one could reach. Her parents, Kate and Arthur Keller, wealthy but desperate, sought answers, traveling to doctors who shook their heads and specialists who offered pity, but no solutions. Helen's world was a prison, her intelligence a fire that burned without outlet, her spirit fierce but directionless. The goldfields tested endurance, the demi-monde demanded deception, but Helen's challenge was to exist in a world that didn't know how to see her. Enter Anne Sullivan, a 20-year-old teacher from the Perkins School for the Blind, who arrived in Tuscumbia in March 1887, her own eyes scarred from childhood illness, her resolve forged by years of hardship, and was no stranger to struggle, raised in a poorhouse, half blind until surgery restored some vision, her determination a match for Helen's fire. She wasn't a savior in a storybook, she was a fighter, practical, stubborn, ready to meet Helen's chaos with discipline and hope. The Kellers' porch was their battlefield, Helen's hands the canvas wherein would paint a new language. She began with finger spelling, pressing letters into Helen's palm, DOLL for a toy, CAKE for a treat. Helen mimicked the shapes, not understanding, her frustration a storm that broke in kicks and screams, and didn't flinch. She moved Helen to a small cottage on the property, away from her parents' indulgence, creating a world where rules replaced chaos. Days were a grind, Helen resisting and persisting, spelling words for water, bread, tree, until a spark flickered. On April 5, 1887, at the water pump, everything changed, and pumped cold water over Helen's hand, spelling WTER into her palm, again and again. Helen froze, her face alight, her mind connecting the wet sensation to the letters, the word to the world. She dropped the pitcher, grabbed Anne's hand, demanded more MUG, PUMP, MOTHER. The prison cracked open, language flooding in. Helen's world no longer silent but alive with meaning. This was a gold strike, her escape from the demi-monde's shadows, a triumph born not of luck but of relentless will. Helen's hunger for words was insatiable. She learned hundreds in weeks, spelling with her fingers, reading raised print, writing with a pencil, and taught her to touch lips, to feel the vibrations of speech, planting seeds for a voice that seemed impossible. By age 10, Helen was reading Braille, mastering grammar, devouring books like Oliver Twist and the Arabian Nights. Her mind, once caged, soared, but the world outside Tuscumbia was skeptical. Could a deaf-blind girl truly learn, or was an ventriloquist shaping Helen's thoughts? The doubters didn't know Helen's fire. She enrolled at the Perkins School in Boston, then the Wright Hugh Mason School in New York, her fingers flying over Braille, her questions endless, and was always there, spelling lectures into her palm. Her own health fading, but her commitment unyielding. Helen's ambition grew, her sights set on Radcliffe College, a dream even and thought daunting. In 1900, Helen passed the entrance exams, her fingers reading questions, her pencil scratching answers, her mind outpacing those who saw her as less. She graduated in 1904, the first deafblind person to earn a bachelor's degree, her cap and gown a symbol of defiance against a world that expected her to fade. But Helen's story wasn't just about learning, it was about speaking. Not just for herself, but for others. She mastered speech, training her vocal cords with Sarah Fuller, a Boston teacher, feeling throat vibrations, shaping sounds through sheer will. Her voice was rough, hard to understand, but it was hers, a weapon she wielded with pride. By her 20s, Helen was a writer, publishing The Story of My Life in 1903. Her words raw and honest, a window into a mind the world couldn't ignore. She became an activist, her causes as bold as her spirit. Women's suffrage, workers' rights, socialism, disability advocacy. She traveled the world, speaking in lecture halls, meeting presidents and kings. Her fingers reading lips, her voice breaking barriers. In Japan, she inspired schools for the blind. In Europe, she championed peace during war's shadow. Her legacy wasn't just personal, it was global, a beacon for those society overlooked. Helen's life wasn't without cost, and her constant companion married in 1905 but stayed by Helen's side. Her health crumbling under the strain, Helen cared for her, roles reversed, until Anne's death in 1936, a loss that left Helen grieving but resolute. She faced criticism, her socialist views branded radical, her disability dismissed as a stunt. Yet she persisted, writing, speaking, raising funds for the American Foundation for the Blind. Her energy a force that defied her limitations. By her death in 1968, Helen had authored 14 books, received the Presidential Medal of Freedom, and changed how the world saw disability. Her story was a cycle of resilience, echoing Eliza S. Defiance in London, S. Salons and Elias S. Endurance in California S. Rivers. Each fought a different battle: Elias against her body's betrayal, Elias against the land's cruelty, Helen against silence itself, but their spirits were kin, refusing to bend to worlds that sought to break them. Helen's triumph was no miracle, it was work, sweat and will, a refusal to let darkness win. Her water pump moment wasn't the end, but the beginning, a spark that lit a life of impact. The gold fields reshaped a nation, the demi-monde revealed hidden strength, and Helen's journey redefined possibility, proving that barriers, like rivers or shadows, could be crossed with enough courage. Her legacy lives in schools, laws, and lives changed, a testament to the human spirit's power to orbit beyond its chains. As we trace Helen's story, we see not just a girl, but a force, a reminder that resilience is history's heartbeat, pulsing through every struggle we've followed. What does it mean to fight when the world says you can't win? How does one life's courage ripple through time, touching others in ways unseen? Our orbit through these stories of courtesans, prospectors, and a girl who spoke through silence reveals a pattern, a cycle of defiance that binds them across centuries. Let's step back now, weaving these threads together to see the tapestry they form. A story of humanity's unyielding spirit that shines through every shadow, every river, every silence, ready to light the way for the journey's end. Step into the quiet glow of a world lit by stories, where the echoes of Eliza Thornton's whispered secrets in London's demi-monde, the glint of Elias T. Whitaker's gold in California's rivers, and the fierce spark of Helen Keller's triumph over silence converge into a single shimmering tapestry. Our orbit through history's hidden cycles has carried us across centuries, from the candlelit salons of 1790 to the muddy camps of 1849 to the quiet Alabama porch of 1887. Each thread a testament to the human spirit's refusal to surrender. These aren't just tales of survival, they are pulses of defiance woven from the raw, unyielding courage of those who faced impossible odds, whether bound by satin contracts, chasing fleeting fortunes, or breaking through a world of darkness. What binds a courtesan's silent war, a prospector's gamble, and a girl's victory over silence? How do their struggles, so different yet so alike, speak to the heart of who we are? Let's weave these threads together, standing at the crossroads of their lives. to see the pattern they form, a pattern that calls us to keep orbiting, to keep chasing the stories that light the past and guide our future. Eliza Thornton, in the shadowed rooms of Drury Lane, fought a battle no one could see. Her body a canvas of secrets, her smile a shield against a world that owned her every breath. Her teas, her baths, her desperate bindings were more than acts of survival. They were acts of rebellion, a refusal to let the demimonde's rules erase her humanity. Across the ocean and decades later, Elias T. Whitaker knelt by a river, his discovery of gold sparking a fever that burned through lives, lands, and dreams. He, Margaret Cole, and Amos Reed faced a frontier that promised riches but delivered hardship, their hands blistered, their hopes tested, their resilience a mirror of Eliz's quiet defiance. And Helen Keller, trapped in a world without sound or sight, found a voice through sheer will. Her water pump moment a spark as bright as Elias's gold. Her legacy a beacon that lit paths for millions. Each story, a different stage, a different struggle, yet all share a single truth. The human spirit bends but does not break. It fights, it endures, it transforms. The demimonde demanded perfection, the gold fields demanded endurance. And Helen's world demanded a miracle, yet in each, the heart found a way. Not just to survive but to shine. Eliz's whispered prayers, Elias's stubborn panning, Helen's relentless learning. These were not just acts, they were declarations. I am here. I will not vanish. I will leave a mark. Their worlds were cruel. London's salons a gilded cage, California's rivers a merciless gamble. Alabama's silence a wall of isolation, but their courage was fiercer. Their stories threads in a tapestry that stretches across time. Touching us today, the California gold rush didn't just reshape a nation. It showed us the cost of ambition, the scars left on land. And people, the Maidu and Miwok whose voices were silenced as surely as Helen's once was. Eliz's demimonde revealed the hidden strength of women who played roles they didn't choose. Their defiance a quiet fire that burned beneath satin and lace. And Helen's triumph proved that no barrier is absolute, that the human spirit can carve a path where none exists. These stories, though centuries apart, are one, a cycle of resilience that orbits through history, reminding us that every struggle, every sacrifice, every victory is part of a larger story, one we're still writing as we stand at the end of this orbit. Let's linger on what these stories mean. Eliza, Elias, Helen, they weren't heroes in capes or crowns. They were people, flawed, frightened, fierce, who faced their worlds and refused to bow. Their lives ask us questions. What would you do when the world demands your silence? How would you fight when the odds are stacked against you? Their answers, in whispered teas, in muddy pans, in finger-spelled words, are a call to us to find our own strength, to chase our own sparks, to leave our own marks. History isn't just a record of dates and names. It's a living pulse, a rhythm of human courage that beats through every story we've followed. The demimonde, the gold fields, the silent world of a child, they're not just past. They're present in every choice we make to stand, to fight, to speak. This is why we orbit, to uncover these threads, to weave them into our own lives. To see that the past isn't gone, it's here in the courage we summon, the dreams we chase, the barriers we break. So, what's next? The past is vast, its stories endless, waiting for us to explore. Will you join us for the next orbit, to dive into new cycles of resilience, new tales of defiance? Hit that subscribe button, drop a comment with which story touched you most, Eliz's secrets, Elias's gold, or Helen's voice, and tell us where you're watching from. The journey doesn't end here, it spirals forward, and we want you with us, orbiting through the shadows, the rivers, the silences, to find the stories that make us human. Let's keep chasing the light of the past together, as we prepare to launch into the next arc of history's endless, unbroken orbit.